everybody and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all well, and if you haven't seen my face before then hi, my name is Kiva and I do true crime videos where I sit down and do my makeup, and if you like that sort of thing then maybe hit that subscribe button, pretty please. Just want to say before I start this, my neighbour is very noisy today, well every day but especially today apparently. I've waited to film for hours because there's people just like mowing the lawns and one person stops and another person will start like just firing up really noisy machines. So I'm really sorry if you can hear that, but I can't really wait any longer. I just want to give a little disclaimer, this case is very heartbreaking and features sexual assault, so if that's going to upset anyone then please click off this video now. Yeah, I'm just going to get into this because this case, ever since I found out about it, it's one of those that just stuck with me. So this video is about the kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart. Elizabeth Ann Smart was born on November 3rd, 1987 to a very religious family. She was the second of 6 children. She was born in Salt Lake City in Utah, and this is pretty much where she stayed throughout her childhood. Everyone loved Elizabeth. She was described as being a very kind, caring, obedient child. Honestly, just like the perfect kid. At only the age of 5 she started playing the harp, and this was one of her passions. She would practice the harp for hours and hours every single day. She loved playing the harp, and hats off to her, honestly, hats off to her. She would play the harp at local events like local weddings, funerals. On top of this, she was a very talented runner. She did long distance and cross country, and she was very academic. Her school described her as being just a very good and observant learner. So on the 4th of June 2002, Elizabeth, she was 14 at this point, her and her family were at an awards evening for her school, where she actually won some awards in academia and for her physical fitness. So they returned home and had a normal evening and went to bed as normal until the early hours of the next day, so the 5th of June 2002, when someone broke into the house. Elizabeth was abducted from her bedroom, and she shared her bedroom with her sister called Mary Catherine, who was only 9 at the time. So she pretty much witnessed it. She did try and tell her parents, but she almost got caught by Elizabeth and the abductor. So she went and hid in her bed for, she says, around 2 hours, but obviously she wasn't really checking the time. Then she went and told them what happened, and at first they thought it was a dream until they saw that like one of the kind of screen things over the window, it had been cut open with a knife. Obviously they called police straight away, and Mary Catherine went and told the police everything that she could remember. And just remember, she's only 9 and it was pretty dark as well. She said it was a white male and he was about the height of her brother Charlie, which is about 5'8". He was 30 to 40 years old. He was wearing light coloured clothes and a golf hat, which I think is like one of those hats that like the Peaky Blinders wear. He had dark hair, and it was also on like his arms and his hands, and he had a gun which he threatened Elizabeth with. She heard Elizabeth say ouch because she stubbed her toe on something, and the man said to her, "You better be quiet and I won't hurt you." She could hear Elizabeth ask, "Why are you doing this?" but she couldn't hear what the other male was saying. But he seemed very soft-spoken, calm and polite though, considering he was stealing someone. And she said she thought she recognised the voice, but she couldn't say who it belonged to and where from. She didn't get a good look at his face. Like I said, it was the middle of the night, you know, it was pitch black. On the 6th of June, her parents went on TV and pled with the kidnappers to bring their daughter home, but obviously nothing came of this. There was a massive search with over 2,000 people involved. Posters were being handed out everywhere with Elizabeth's face on. After days of searching, the police kind of put an end to it though, because they wanted to put their resources into something else that would be more useful, because clearly she wasn't in the area. Obviously Mary Catherine, she tried, but her observations weren't the best, and they had nothing to go on. Like, they had no clue who this man was. And the police did everything right in this case. They were questioning hundreds of people who had anything to do with like child abductions or anything to do with children in the area pretty much, who they thought could have done something to Elizabeth. They considered one local man called Richard a kind of suspect because he had been like in trouble with the law before. He was known to have drug and alcohol problems. He'd done work for this family as well before, so we kind of knew them. But sadly he died in August 2002. Now the family, they tried to keep her name in the press, but obviously like the press aren't gonna report on it forever. So her name did go out of the press, but they did set up their own like website to try and help them find her. One of the biggest breakthroughs in this case happened in October 2002 when Mary Catherine, it hit her where she knew the voice from. She recognised the voice from a man called Emmanuel, and the family had hired him for one day to rake leaves up and just kind of do general work around the house. Police were a bit sceptical at first because obviously it had been months since Elizabeth had disappeared, and it had been months since she heard this man's voice, and she only saw him for that one day. So police were a little bit sceptical, but it was all they had. So the police let the family describe how he looked and draw up a composite sketch. And this was actually featured on a few different TV shows that were kind of well known in America. But this composite sketch wasn't even released until February 2003, and it was on a show called America's Most Wanted. So just the next month, on the 13th of March, this is 2003, it's been 9 months since Elizabeth went missing. Two couples recognised a man in a supermarket. They recognised him as Emmanuel, the man who they saw on TV, and he was wanted. People thought that, you know, he was something to do with Elizabeth's disappearance. So the shop he was seen in was Sandy, Utah, and he was reported to be with a woman and a girl. So both couples reported this to the police. So police headed out there to, you know, see if it was Emmanuel and to see if he had anything to do with it. And it's reported that the girl that was with them was wearing sunglasses and a grey wig, like in a disguise. So the officers started questioning her and asking her for her name, and they recognised her. They were convinced it was Elizabeth Smart, but she kept refusing and called herself Augustine, and she was just saying that she was not Elizabeth Smart. The police knew, and she was just very, very scared. They knew they'd found Elizabeth Smart after 9 months, so they arrested the woman and the man.
When you first saw her, what was going through your mind?
You know, originally we didn't realize who it was that we were speaking to. After you know, quite a bit of just kind of a street side interview with her and Mitchell and Barzee, we kind of started putting 2 and 2 together. You know, and as we were speaking to them, that's when we realized who we had.
And what were they saying that tipped you off?
You know, they were saying many things like where they were from wasn't adding up, that they were messengers of God, that, you know, that they were just traveling, that type of thing. It just didn't make sense. Their stories just didn't make sense.
Yeah, some of their answers were not consistent with each other, and we separated when we first got there, and that's what we do. And their answers just were not adding up to us, so we know we had something. We didn't know what for sure at the time, but then we kind of started piecing it together a little bit more.
And was Elizabeth reluctant to speak?
She was kind of being a little intimidated, if you will, or controlled. Mr. Mitchell was trying to dominate the conversation. That's when we made sure we separated everybody with a little bit of distance. She was still a little reluctant to give us the complete information that we wanted, the truth, until almost 45 minutes had passed.
Wow, and one of you basically said, "Are you Elizabeth Smart?"
Yes, we did. At the point that we realized who it was, we asked her, we said, "Are you Elizabeth Smart?" And she was reluctant. She was very scared, very nervous. You know, and understandably so. She was a 14-year-old girl that was being controlled and dominated. But she looked at both of us and said, "If thou sayest." And we're like, "What did you say?" And she said, "If thou sayest." And, you know, and kind of gave nonverbal cues and shaking her head that, yeah, that's who I am. And you could see she was very relieved at that point.
So the man that was thought to be called Emmanuel, his real name is actually Brian David Mitchell, and the woman that he was with, and she was with them both, is called Wanda Barzee. Brian was kind of the brains, and he was the main person who organised all of this and sorted it all out. But obviously Wanda was still a massive part in what happened. Brian was born on October 18th, 1953 in Salt Lake City, Utah. And he was the third of 6 children in a heavily Mormon family. From a young age, his father would show him explicit images to teach him about sex and sexual education. And to teach him independence, he would just drop him off at random places that he didn't know and expect him to find his way home. When he was 16, he exposed himself to a child and he got sent to juvie. And then at the age of 19, he got married to a 16-year-old girl. They had 2 children, but it didn't work out, and they got divorced, and she got custody of the kids. But he fled with the kids for a little bit and went to New Hampshire, and this is where he lived for the next 2 years. Throughout his adult life, he had a really bad drug addiction, and when he returned to Salt Lake City, his brother inspired him to get sober and take up this new religious life. He married again and had 2 more children, and his wife already had 3 children from a previous marriage. But this didn't work out, and his ex-wife said that he would sexually assault their son, and one of her other daughters from her other marriage said that he was sexually assaulting her for 4 years. The day that him and his second wife, their divorce was confirmed and official, he got married to Wanda. Wanda was born November 6, 1945, and she had 6 children from her previous marriage, but she had a bad relationship with her children. One of them reported that she was a monster and that once she cooked her pet rabbit and fed it to the daughter, which is very traumatizing. And both of them are heavily involved in the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints, and this was the same religion that the Smart family were in as well. So Brian, at this point, he got obsessed with this religion. He started going by the name Emmanuel and saying he was a prophet from God himself, and he would go out and preach all his visions on the streets and say he can see the future. and the church were like, we don't want anything to do with this guy, so they booted him out. Wanda started going by the name Hepzibah. He started dressing in white robes, he grew out his beard, and he was saying he was like basically like close to Jesus. And in his visions he was getting told that he was going to fight the Antichrist, and that to do this he had to have lots of virgin brides. So he thought, hey, why don't I go kidnap some girls? Mary Catherine was right. Obviously he knew Elizabeth, he'd worked for the family before, and for some reason he chose her. Honestly, no one's really sure why. I think it's just because he knew her and he knew the house. Obviously she was woken on the 5th of June 2002, and he didn't have a gun, he had a knife, and he said to her if she made a sound then he would kill all of her family and she just had to go with him. So he took her from her house and he made her go in the woods with him, and they reached a little like kind of camp area, and this is where Wanda was waiting. Wanda made her go into the tent and started washing her feet to help cleanse her, and Wanda told Elizabeth to change out of her PJs and into some robes that she was given, and she refused, and Wanda said that she would get Brian to come and rip her pyjamas off her. So she got changed. So once she got changed, Brian then came into the tent and performed like a wedding ceremony on her, saying that they were now married. And then he raped her. There's a lot of like things that she said. She's very open about her experience, and she said that she tried to fight him off, but a 14-year-old girl against a grown man, it doesn't even out. So Brian told her why he had done this. He said he was an angel and that he was like a king, and he would emerge in 7 years, be stoned by a mob, lie dead in the streets for 3 days, and then rise up and kill the Antichrist. And he had to have all his brides around him for the Antichrist. He had to gather loads of girls. Apparently she was lucky because she was the first of his virgin brides. And the camp that she was being held at was only 3 miles away from her house, and she could literally hear people at the beginning of her kidnapping. She could hear people shouting for her and trying to search for her, but she was told that if she tried to like shout back or let anyone know that she was there, that her entire family would be killed. She even heard like search helicopters go over top, and she couldn't do anything. She had a metal cable around her ankle and it was connected to a tree, so she couldn't go very far at all from outside of the camp. She could pretty much just walk around the camp. It wasn't that big at all. And she did try and like pick the locks and get this off, but she couldn't do it. Like, she needed the key, which only Brian had. They said to Elizabeth that they were her new family and she had to forget about her old life, and they said to her to pick a new name. It had to be a religious name, and she picked the name Esther, which was from the Old Testament. And she said that she picked this because in the end Esther won against the bad guys, and she wanted to be like Esther. So during her captivity she was raped at least once a day, sometimes more than once. And obviously Wanda was around. Wanda, she was like fine with it. She'd be forced to read pornographic magazines, and they would threaten to kill her all the time. They would force her to have alcohol and drugs to lower her resistance. She was barely fed, and sometimes she was literally fed garbage. Like, they just did not treat her well. He would go into town and bring back her missing persons posters and taunt her with them, saying that no one would ever find her and that he had the real deal. And after a while, like, he did start letting her go out to like fetch water with them and stuff. But even though her chain was removed and one day it was never put back on, she still had the mental chains there. And a lot of people have like said, you know, why didn't you escape? But she was like mentally abused and beaten down so much that she kind of couldn't. And sometimes they would let Elizabeth go out with them. So to begin with, it would just be Brian going out and he would leave Wanda over there with Elizabeth. But eventually they let Elizabeth start to go out with them, and they would all dress in like full body robes, and Wanda and Elizabeth would have to wear like face veils so only their eyes could be seen. See, like, they wouldn't let her out of their sight. They didn't want her to tell anyone. And she said that she would try and look at people like deep in the eyes to kind of plead with them, but obviously no one could mind read, so it was very rare that anyone recognised her. And in August 2002 they decided they wanted to relocate for the winter, so they went to the library to research, and one of the people working at the library thought he recognised her, so he called the police. So a police detective went out and went to speak to them in the library, and Brian was the only person who spoke. He said in their religion that girls weren't allowed to speak, and he claimed that was his daughter called Augustine, and he said that they couldn't take any of their religious like clothing off because the detective did ask this. And basically the detective gave up in the end and left. Elizabeth later said, "I felt like hope was walking out the door. I was mad at myself that I didn't say anything, mad at myself for not taking the chance. So close, I felt so terrible that the detective hadn't pushed harder. He just walked away. And they went on so many trips to restaurants, grocery stores, and honestly I can't imagine how heartbreaking this would be, because she would see her poster up and she couldn't do anything. Photos were took of her in the fall of 2002, like at parties. They took her to parties. At one point she accidentally mentioned her cousin Olivia, and Brian tried to kidnap Olivia too, but he was unsuccessful at breaking into the house. In September 2002 they relocated to San Diego, and they would just set up camp and then move around often at this point. And honestly, San Diego was not great for them. Like, they didn't really know people, just bad idea for them to move there. And obviously Elizabeth felt terrible, because she knew the further she got from home, the less people that would know and recognise her. And obviously Brian would go out and get supplies, and one time he got arrested and he was gone for multiple days. And the girls almost starved because they couldn't leave the camp without him. And he basically got arrested for breaking into a church, which, classy dude, classy. And then they were deciding to relocate somewhere else. And basically Elizabeth knew they made up religion at this point, and she said to them that God had spoke to her and said to like return to Salt Lake City in the old camp. So she managed to get them to do this. So they went back, and it was only like a day after they actually got back that she was recognised in that grocery store. And that kind of brings us up to date on her being found. She returned home and she tried to live a very normal life. And surprisingly, she managed to do this pretty quick. She went back to school. Just a few weeks after her discovery, her and her family went on to a hike and went to the place she was kept. And she said it was kind of like therapy, you know. It helped her get over it. And she has said, I don't think it's worth spending time in the past. It's not something I think about. If I feel like I want to retell my story, I will, but I don't have to. I don't talk about it much. I don't really care to. And the court proceedings took ages, and the main reason was because they were unsure if Brian was like mentally stable because of his religious beliefs. It was kind of a case of one psych would find him to be not stable and not well enough to stand trial, and others would say he was, so it's kind of back and forth all the time. And his team did try and get a plea deal where he would plead guilty to kidnapping and burglary for a 10 to 15 year sentence, but Elizabeth could not testify. But the court threw this out because they didn't want to get rid of the sexual assault charges on him. Because of like the plea deals not being accepted and his mental state, the court did not actually like do the official trial until 2010. In court he would like start singing hymns all of a sudden. He would shout like religious stuff at like the people in the court. Wanda's was a lot easier. She got sentenced to 15 years in state and federal prison, and she's actually been released. She was released in September 2018, which I find crazy. How on earth was this woman let out of jail? I find it terrifying that I am living in a world where this woman is free. And finally he was found to be guilty of kidnapping and transporting a minor across state lines to engage in sexual activity. On December 11, 2010 he was sentenced to life in prison without parole, and he's currently in a high security prison and he will never get out. Elizabeth, she's gone on to live an incredible life. She went to university and studied music performance. She's a massive public speaker. She's done interviews with Oprah Winfrey. She's honestly like amazing. She's written books. She stands up for other victims of kidnapping. She felt like she had so many chances to escape, and people have criticised her for not escaping, saying she had Stockholm syndrome, but she said she didn't, that everything she did was for her own survival. And I kind of agree with her there, because you know, no one else was in that situation. She was, and what can anyone else say? You know, that's her experience, not theirs, so they need to back off. Become a great activist for victims of kidnapping, victims of sexual abuse and child victims of violence. He went on a trip to Paris in 2009 and had to return just briefly for like Brian and to testify against him. And when she went back, she was there for like a religious trip, and she actually met someone. She met a man called Matthew Gilmore who was Scottish, and they were part of the same religion, you know, and they actually went on to get married, and at this point they've got 3 children, which is so cute. In 2011 she started the Elizabeth Smart Foundation to empower children and provide support to families and victims of trauma. And that year she was actually like considered a special correspondent at ABC, like reporting on missing people and victims of kidnapping. She also written a book about what she went through, and she said, I want people to know that I'm happy in my life right now as a form of closure. And yeah, that's kind of all the information I've got on this. And obviously what happened to Elizabeth was so heartbreaking, but she got through it and she's out living an amazing life, and I'm sure what happened haunts her every day. But I kind of wanted to share something a bit more positive, because I feel like a lot of true crime like YouTubers focus on cases that end with like bodies being found or bodies not being found and people being charged with murder. And this case is proof. Like, people presume if someone's missing for this amount of time, they'll be dead, and she was alive. Everything she did was for her own survival. She easily could have been killed if she stepped out of line, but because of her smarts, and only the age of 14 as well, she managed to survive this. And I haven't actually seen anyone else do this case on YouTube, which I find so sad, because this case deserves to be spoke about. It's proof that good things can happen. And I found out about this because an actress that I like and follow on Instagram called Alana Bowden, she actually portrayed Elizabeth Smart in a film in 2017. And that's kind of how I heard about it, and the film honestly is incredible. I watched it when it came out, and I watched it yesterday as well, and I cried a lot. Honestly, it's heartbreaking. Elizabeth, like, she helped produce it, she helped write it, like, it's all true. And honestly, it's so heartbreaking. And the thing I love about it is, like, in movies they tend to dramatise things that are based on true events, but this is the truth because what happened to her was bad enough. People talk a lot about how, like, when criminals do bad things and getting the death penalty is an easy way out because they can't think about what they've done. And I kind of feel like that relates to this, because if she did get killed, then she wouldn't be living with the memories, and she still is, and that makes her so brave in my opinion. Yeah, honestly, I recommend going and following her Instagram. It's so powerful. She's just an incredible woman. She's so strong. I aspire to be like her. But yeah, I will hope to see you in the next video. Bye guys.